Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. So tonight, Alex Heath, and I are doing a Facebook Live talking about is recovery possible from birth trauma, and I'm really pleased that Alex has offered to do the session with me. I did Alex's training about 18 months ago, and I have found it such a gift to support women who've experienced birth trauma. So I thought it would be great to have her on tonight to talk about the programme and is it possible to recover from birth trauma. There's Alex. Hello. Just going to add Alex. So Alex is she's a clinical hypnotherapist. Here she comes. Hello.
Hello, hello. I'm just going to close my back door because my dog's running in and out of the garden and it might be a bit distracting.
It looks warm down there. Is it warm?
It is. It is. Today, this afternoon, yeah, really warm, really lovely actually. Yes.
Yeah, lovely. So, because it's been nice here, but quite windy. So, it's funny.
It's been breezy here, and it was really rainy earlier, but now it seems to have sorted itself out again in time for sports day tomorrow.
Good. Good. I was just introducing you. So Alex is a clinical hypnotherapist and birth doula who's committed to helping mums and dads experience the best birth possible. And when this isn't possible, helping them to recover from and heal from any traumatic birth experience. She's a fan of bringing tried and tested techniques to help parents so they can navigate these challenges and go on to thrive with their families, which I love the sound of that. She's worked with hundreds of parents to lift the heavy feelings that can remain after a difficult or traumatic birth or perinatal experience. The process has proved so effective for parents that she's trained over 160 birth professionals in these skills since 2015. So, and I was just saying earlier, the program that you have developed is such a gift to have as somebody who works with women around that whole period, because it's such a fast, effective, brilliant way, a brilliant tool to use with women. So, what made you interested? So, just welcome. Sorry, first of all, welcome. What got you so interested in working in this area? What was it that? How did it start? How did you get? Because you developed such an insightful. You're so insightful into these parents that have experienced this, and you've developed such a clever technique with working with them. But what got you so interested in the first place?
Thanks, Tricia. Yeah. Thank you for such a lovely introduction. It's lovely to come on here now and get to talk about the thing that I'm really passionate about. My route to working with a lot of birth trauma actually was really paradoxically not through having experienced birth trauma myself, but it was because I hadn't experienced it that I had to really consider quite hard what was going on for parents that had. So I had two really good births. I mean, to be fair, I had really difficult pre and postnatal periods, but the births themselves, I'm an unusual case in that the births themselves were really good. And so I when I retrained to be a hypnotherapist, I started teaching a lot of hypnosis for birth because I was very evangelical about it. But very quickly, I started to get a lot of second-time parents who wanted to use hypnobirthing to have a better birth next time. And I found working with these parents that they really struggled to hear the positive birth piece, because every time we even talked about birth, even in a positive way, it was obvious to me that they were so re-triggered and frightened that it was like a barrier to anything else. The fear was so gripping for those parents that it was really difficult. So I had that set of parents that were coming to hypnobirthing for the first time after a difficult birth. But also I started to see more and more parents who'd done my course who were coming back who hadn't had good birth experiences. And I felt really awful for these parents, because obviously hypnobirthing is about a really positive birth experience, and I just felt really responsible and guilty, and I didn't really know what to say or what to do in those kind of debriefing situations. So I had to really go back and think about it from their point of view. And then about 3 years ago, I trained to be a birth doula as well, because there was something in my mind with my returning parents that was thinking, why are they all being traumatized? Like, what's wrong? Why isn't the hypnobirthing working? And trying to be a birth doula, and I was attending births at hospitals, and I was like, oh, I get it now. Now I get it. Now I understand why this is so traumatic for so many parents. And I myself attended 2 really traumatic births and experienced trauma vicariously. So then at that point, 3 years ago, I was like, oh right, I really get it now. I had like a real understanding of what caused it, from an experiential point of view and from a neurological point of view. And because I was a hypnotherapist, I could work through a way of lifting those symptoms that just really created the space and opportunity for parents to then go on and replan their next birth, or just to simply begin enjoying parenthood, which was really good.
Yeah. Because that's the thing, it takes over. And that's quite interesting, because one of the reasons why I trained to do EFT was I found a lot of women who had done hypnobirthing first time round, and then they were coming to me having experienced birth trauma, and they probably weren't keen to do hypnobirthing again at that point. But I felt I needed to have a tool. So then I trained to do EFT, and then obviously I used the rewind technique as well. But that's really interesting, because I didn't realise that at all. That's the first time I've heard that. And in terms of, so what you've said just now, so why are some, in your opinion, why are some women traumatized by the birth experience and other women aren't traumatized?
Well, this is quite a point of common misconception, because a lot of people, and parents including, who feel traumatized, a lot of people think that birth trauma is about experiencing physical trauma, or experiencing like a serious medical event, or it being very long or very painful, or full of intervention, or experiencing loss, or any of those really obviously what we would think of as really difficult situations. But actually, I've found that it's not even it's not necessarily about what happens, it's how somebody feels about what has happened. And if somebody feels very unsafe, if somebody fears for their life or for their baby's life, if they're not listened to, if they're not treated with dignity, and if they're not treated with respect, and if they feel that they're really trapped in that situation, then it is very stressful. It would be stressful for any of us. So it's a normal human reaction to then to then go into the fight or flight state. Now, in that fight or flight state, neurologically, the brain is then set up to form a link, a neural pathway between the emotion center and the memory of what has happened, which is why it's so re-triggering afterwards for parenting. So it's the thing to bear in mind is that whether somebody finds something traumatic is less about what happens and more about how they felt, how they were looked after, how they were supported, and how cared for and safe they felt. And in terms of what happens afterwards, in terms of experiencing traumatic symptoms afterwards, that is really a normal human response to what has been a very, very stressful situation for the person.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's true. And I think often they think, why do I feel like this? Or they blame themselves for whatever it is, but it's a completely normal reaction to that situation. And I think it's one of the times that you're most vulnerable in your whole life. And it's one of the times that you need to feel safe, you need to feel cared for, you need to feel looked after, you need to know that your baby's going to be okay. And when you don't feel like that, that is when that's when the trauma occurs. Because I think really you're so vulnerable. You know, it's a really, really vulnerable time. So and in terms of, so you've developed this amazing birth trauma recovery program, which I absolutely love using. Can you give us a bit more about how it evolved and how it works, and just a bit more information to people that are watching this?
Yeah, sure.
I'd be really interested.
Yeah, sure. So what I've developed is known as a 3-step rewind method of working, and the rewind part of it refers to an exercise that comes from a school of therapy known as NLP, which stands for neuro-linguistic programming. And really is what rewind is just a way of guiding someone through their memory in a certain way, and asking them to watch it rewind again on the screen of their mind, that they do over and over and over again until the memory that has become encoded and linked to the fight or flight center, the amygdala, it becomes broken. So all of the heavy emotions, and it could be anything from fear to shame, to guilt, it could be anger, it could be anxiety, pure panic, any of those, all of those things, they kind of become detached from the memory. So the memory is free to go off to the long-term store, and there's this sort of gap, this kind of window where a person can rapidly relearn how they would like to feel instead. So this is really about working with somebody's own perception of what they would like to be different, really. And that's what makes it so gentle, because I'm not telling anyone how they should feel about their birth, and I'm not suggesting that they should feel differently about it. I'm just really saying, if you were able to not feel that way, how would you choose to feel? And that's really all of the work that happens in step 1. So rewind is just one part of it, but the real magic happens in the first step, which is all about being able to bring what I term as bringing relief with a debrief. So being able to listen to somebody effectively, and to hear their story, to validate and acknowledge their feelings, which for so many people, that's like a really missing component. Nobody's ever said, gosh, you know, I'm not surprised you feel the way you do, given what you've been through. That sounds absolutely horrendous. And to really hear how it's affecting their day-to-day life, because is what happens is when something bad happens to us, we tend to have feelings about it, and rather than cleaning ourselves of these feelings and moving on, we tend to kind of carry them around and adapt our behavior. And in birth trauma, this means that we'll avoid other mums or other situations where we might hear about birth, or it might mean that we'll drive the long way round so we don't have to drive past the hospital, or it might mean avoiding scenarios where you might need an internal examination, for example. I mean, the triggers are vast and different for everyone, but you know, really listening to understand how a person how a person's life would change without those. You know, how would it be different for somebody if they were able to be comfortable around hearing other people's birth stories? I mean, that's often a real biggie, you know, being able to hear somebody else's birth story without feeling angry or jealous or just really upset that they didn't have that. And then working through that to kind of to allow that person to experience those feelings when they're very, very relaxed.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really common, and actually often they find it really difficult to hear positive birth stories, and you know, or if somebody falls pregnant, they find that really difficult because they're worried about what's going to happen to them, or if they see birth on television, or if they hear a birth story or in the media or anything at all, it can be really, really triggering. And actually, often it's complete avoidance, so they might avoid pregnant people, or just avoid all of those sort of scenarios. So it has a huge
many women
impact. It has a huge impact on their life. It's because there's only so long you can actually avoid that for. So, and in terms of, have you had a woman and the partners who had experienced difficult birth, what advice would you give them? What would you recommend that they do?
It depends at what stage they're at. I think the important thing to say is that for many people, after they go through any traumatic event, and it's probably worth interjecting here, you and I, we're talking about birth trauma, but we're talking about any trauma that happens during that perinatal phase. So that could be breastfeeding trauma, it could be sleep deprivation, it could be like a really difficult postnatal period, it could be miscarriage, it could be loss. You know, it's not just birth, it's that, as you said, Trisha, that whole perinatal period, women are so vulnerable, and really need to feel safe, and often our care system isn't set up to provide that feeling of safety. So in order to answer your question about what I would suggest to parents who have experienced any difficult event, is to give themselves time to heal, to draft in as much help as they can, to support themselves. And that might mean, if they've just had a baby, hiring a doula, or hiring a breastfeeding consultant, or getting the help that they need, or drafting in extra family, and really giving themselves time and space to heal. But I think it's worth impressing upon anyone who's gone through any traumatic event that if they don't feel better after a period of time, and if they recognise that this change in them is lasting, and it's bringing a negative consequence to their day-to-day life, that it's really, really worth finding specialist help and support. And you know, just being really rigorous about that, ringing around and finding somebody who you connect with and who you gel with and who you think, oh, that's actually someone I can trust and can work with. Because actually there are lots of different trauma therapies out there. Mine is just one of them, and I know because I've trained so many people now, and they also tell me how successful it is. I know it's effective, but I'm not so arrogant to say it's the only way for somebody to find relief. And I think that we just all need to be really positive about the fact that recovery is possible, and it's worth seeking, and it's worth committing to, because it can make such a difference to a family's life, you know, and their emotional and mental well-being. So that's what I'd probably say.
Yeah, and it's not just a short term, I think it's a long term, because the long term impact of having experienced a traumatic event in that perinatal period, and actually, you know, postnatally, there's, you know, women who've been in the mother and baby unit, or women who've had postnatal depression. I remember my counsellor saying to me, almost like I had PTSD from my postnatal depression, because I felt so ill for such a long amount of time. And I do think that there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of that, but I think it has such a long-term impact that you know, that experience in terms of, you know, with your family, with your partner, with your extended family, with friendships, with all sorts of other people. I think it really has a big impact. And I think often, and I think often it's not really actually understood, actually, that the impact of those experiences at that time. Because I think we go into that time expecting it to be completely wonderful, be in a bubble, and it's going to be completely perfect, but actually often, you know, not often, but it's common for it not to be.
It is difficult, and there are so many things, and I think there are so many sort of myths about motherhood, that we're all supposed to find it easy, and that You know, that we've all got it. We're women. We've got all the anatomy to physically care for a baby and birth a baby. So it's going to be easy, and it's the world's most natural thing. And when it's not, and when it's difficult, as it so often is, for most of us, will have experienced some difficulty at some point with that. You know, the whole social attitude that we have, that it's, you know, that's not normal, is really set up against us. You know, it's incredibly normal to struggle, and I think the more we can talk about that, and the more we can be honest about our experiences, and say, look, you know, I really didn't enjoy that bit, that was really difficult, I think it makes it easier for future. You know, I certainly hope my daughter doesn't feel like I did, that you have to kind of just put your head down and muddle through it, because everyone and because nobody knows how to contain your upset as well, I think, is another big thing in society. No one knows what to do with that level of upset, do they? You're like a bit of a hot potato.
I know. Actually, I think you're right. I remember people really struggling to know, and even now, if I say to somebody, oh yeah, I had mental health issues, people really struggle with that. And yet I'm like, I talk about it so openly, because I really, really, really believe that the only way we can ever get rid of shame and stigma around mental health is to keep talking and to share experiences.
That's it. You just have to keep talking.
I know, because I feel that if one person hears it and connect with it, and then they get help earlier, that's been worth it. And I feel no shame at all. I feel complete pride, because all of the things that have happened to me have made me who I am now, and I wouldn't be doing this work, and I wouldn't be working with women if it wasn't for the experiences that I have. So, and
it's so powerful. It's so powerful for every woman to hear that as well. Trisha, I commend you for your honesty in that, because how are we ever going to change these like huge, like they're like universal mistruths, really, that are set up against us, you know. And I think until we start kind of airing some of them out there and saying, look, you know what, that's not really realistic, some of these things, and you know what, we might need a bit of help, and there's absolutely no shame in that at all. Sure.
Well, I think as soon as the other night, Sarah did a Facebook Live with Sarah the other night, and we have never parented so much as we are right now, and we've never parented so much in isolation as we are right now. And I think that's part of the reason. You know, I think we aren't cared for, we aren't looked after in that whole time. So, and it is really, really, really hard. And Sarah had like a really great stat, which was that looking after a baby takes between 16 and 21 hours a day. So if you think about that, it's really, really hard. And when you've had a difficult experience, which you're recovering from emotionally, mentally, physically, as well as looking after a baby who's got all those requirements, you can start to understand why women can really, really struggle with it. So
absolutely. And why trauma is so like rife, really, you know, and it always makes me sort of a bit sad when women really minimalize, but I've done it myself, you know. I've minimalized my experiences and kind of just kind of gone, oh yeah, that breastfeeding was really difficult for me, and I still feel, you know, a bit of a failure about it now. But actually, you know, that in itself was like its own mini trauma. And I know it's for many women, and actually it's been great being able to train so many lactation consultants this year in those skills, because they, you know, the women, so many of the women that they see are not, you know, they're having a traumatic breastfeeding experience, but they've also come from a difficult postnatal experience or a difficult birth experience, and it's just layered and layered and layered and layered. And to me, it's no wonder that we have so much postnatal depression, because we don't deal with the difficult stuff that happens.
Yeah, that's right. And we don't deal with the difficult, like you said earlier, things like that happen, like often, like I've worked with couples who maybe have had a miscarriage or really struggled with their fertility journey, and actually when they haven't dealt with that at the time, that is often the thing that comes back afterwards as well. So it's those sort of that often come back, and nobody knows what to say to them, or it's like going back to that, a bit of a hot potato. So yeah. Yeah, it is really difficult.
And there's nothing for these women either,
No.
really. It's such a postcode lottery, and more money has been pledged. But I without wanting to sound negative, you know, I'm not quite sure how the NHS would effectively deal with this problem, given that a lot of the problem has come from under-financing and under-resourcing of the NHS in the first place, resulting in poor care that results in trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
So really there is nowhere for a lot of women to go, which is why I seized upon the opportunity of training birth professionals in these skills, because they're the ones, it's the breastfeeding counsellors, it's the doulas, it's the you know, it's the health visitors, it's all of these professionals that have the contact with parents already, and that parents already feel safe and already trust, so they're more they're so perfectly positioned, and this way of working, it isn't 6 sessions, it isn't 12. Most of the time it's 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 sessions, to be able to really lift the symptoms and stuff. So it has proven really popular, I think, just because there's just such a huge need.
Yeah, I know. And actually, that's quite interesting, because I had somebody last week who's a mental health nurse, and she's CBT trained, and she came for the session, and she couldn't believe that after one session, the difference that she felt. So she came in completely blind, not really knowing what to expect.
Yeah.
But I think that just says it all.
That's really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've trained a few counsellors, a few psychotherapists, and even a few NHS psychologists now, and there is that moment of like, but how can, because it completely flies in the face of this whole thing about it, you know, or it's painful, so it's going to be difficult, it's going to take a long time, and it's going, you know, and that's not that helpful or that inspiring for parents to hear.
Yeah, totally agree. So, and in terms of somebody's had a difficult birth, what would you recommend for them to prepare for the next again birth?
I would definitely recommend dealing with some of the stuff that comes up. So this is a really common one, and I went for a spate of, actually, this was my typical parent that was presenting. They had a difficult birth, but you know what? They'd just got on with it. They'd got on with it. You know what it's like, first year with the baby, busy. 2 years later, they got pregnant again, and then bang, it hits them like a ton of bricks, and they're having panic attacks, they're freaking out, they're not really connecting with the pregnancy or the baby, they're dreading the birth, and every day that goes on, the fear builds and it builds and it builds and it builds, and it's really tough though. So I would say to anyone in that particular situation, that's very, very common, is do try and seek out a practitioner who is experienced and skilled in something like Rewind. Have a look at my website, www.birthtraumarecovery.com, and there's a whole list of practitioners by area on there. And the great thing about that is that a lot of those practitioners have other skills, so they're birth doulas, or they're midwives, or they're counsellors, and so they can support you with any other needs as well. So once they've helped lift some of the fear and anxiety and panic that person's experiencing, they can then practically help them plan for another birth. And that might be in personalised care planning, it might be in helping them get a VBAC, or whatever it is. But because they're all birth professionals or pre or postnatal specialists, they have the skills to be able to do that. They get it, they know it, in a way that perhaps just a sort of ordinary counsellor or psychologist might not.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it is often about really thinking about how to identify things that maybe will trigger them, or identify like ways of doing things a bit differently, knowing how to navigate the system.
Absolutely.
To make sure that they're completely protected within that. And I think that that's something that only people who are familiar with the system can actually do. So,
exactly. And that actually have perhaps links and ties with the local hospital, or with the MVP, or whatever it is that can really help them. And like you say, it's a bit of knowledge and a bit of skill in getting sign off on a personalized birth plan that takes into consideration what somebody has been through before. But it's well worth doing, because when somebody does have a good second birth, it is tremendous for them. It's so healing, and it's
amazing,
and the difference is huge, isn't it? As I'm sure you well know yourself.
I think all the births I've been at this year have all been following a difficult birth first time round, and they've all been extremely healing, beautiful experiences. All of them have been amazing. I think I've just had this spate of really good birth luck on our side, and I think we've done a lot of planning. I think I've done Rewind with all of them, and I think it's I think that sort of demonstrates how successful it is. I think can clear that trauma and then get them focused next second time round. And really identify, like as you sort of say, a personalised birth plan, but also identify what triggers, maybe what things that might cause anxiety.
Absolutely.
Maybe changing the location of the birth, or just changing things so that it's perfect for them. So and I think it makes a huge difference.
It's well worth doing it.
Totally.
It's well worth doing it. I think if without that, the tension and the anxiety, it becomes really untenable at some point for parents, because it just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, totally agree. And in terms of, one of my big things right now is about prevention of birth trauma, or reducing the risk of birth trauma, and I'm really, really passionate about that. What are your thoughts about how that can happen, whether that's women preparing to reduce their risk, or whether it's a much bigger question about how we can reduce the numbers of women that are experiencing birth trauma?
For sure. It's really interesting, actually. I was really honoured and privileged this weekend to be at a yoga birth AGM and to facilitate some birth trauma work around that. And there were a few independent midwives on there, and we were talking about prevention, and really it's what needs to happen on the part of the NHS is that they need to reintroduce case loading, so a woman has a named and known midwife throughout her care and throughout her birth, because that's really one very easy way. I mean, it's it requires more investment and commitment from the trust, but it's one easy way to really safeguard against trauma, because if a woman knows her midwife, and if she feels safe and secure and confident in her care, then she is to a very large degree protected from experiencing trauma. Failing that in areas that don't have case loading, and that unfortunately it is few and far between now, case loading, especially in the London area that I'm in, then hiring a doula or hiring someone who can protect your space, who can make you feel safe. Trauma happens when we feel a threat to our life. So the more safe and the more secure we can feel, the more we are safeguarding ourselves against trauma. And that's all about the people around us. It's all about our environment. Where are you going to feel safest giving birth? Who are you going to feel safest with? Who's going to protect you? Who's going to make that happen? And those are the sort of things that first-time mums really need to be asking themselves to kind of protect themselves from having a traumatic or difficult experience.
Yeah, and actually that's a lot of stuff that I've written in my birth bundle, and it's a lot of the stuff is about the environment, feeling safe, about thinking about how to make yourself even feel safe within an unfamiliar space, about asking the right kind of questions, about how your partner can advocate and look after you. And actually it's a lot of things I think a lot of women don't actually think about until it's too late. They don't understand the need for that until
I think
you
just see so many first-time parents who've done my hypnobirthing course, and of course because I didn't really know, because I hadn't had my babies in hospital, so I didn't, when they were coming back and they were describing their experience, I didn't really understand. And it wasn't until I supported a few births as a doula in hospitals I was like, oh, I get it now. And that's what it's like for these poor parents. They've got no idea until they're in that situation how on a really difficult day in a hospital, you really do feel like a sausage for a sausage factory, you know. And I don't say that wanting to scare parents at all, but just to really plan and to really think about, you know, what you need on that day. Because unfortunately, if you do go on a day and it's really busy and, you know, you've got a really battle worn thing of staff and midwives, then, you know, it's a, you know, it can be really challenging, really challenging.
No, it can be really challenging. So Alex, I'd like to give you a big massive thank you for coming, for doing the session tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Trisha. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
To get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so definitely pop on over to my website. I'll see if I can write it in the comments, and you can send me, all of my contact details are on the website there, and you can have a look about you know, you can learn a bit more about the sort of things that we've been talking about, but also about some of the resources that are available to parents and to birth professionals as well. What I'm really passionate about is as many birth professionals and pre and postnatal specialists as possible having these skills, because the more knowledge there is about what causes these problems, is the only way that we're going to kind of move forward in our thinking about what women need at this time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I would really encourage people, if they've got any more questions or if they've got any questions, they can ask us afterwards.
Do.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks so much, Trisha. I've really enjoyed it. Lots of love to you, darling. Take care. Bye.